Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special SWAPCAST, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree Holiday Season. I'm Monica Perez, joined by my Propaganda Report co-host Brad Binkley and our friends in Liberty, Car and Bird of the Timeline Earth podcast, and Jake Lindsay, a.k.a. Chillderburg of Tasting Anarchy and Californian in Exile podcast. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Feels good.
It's our pleasure, I have to say, because it is a holiday, and I will obviously use any excuse, holiday or not, to have a cocktail. Mm-hmm. I appreciated that Bird turned me on to the coquito, possibly the most fattening thing I've ever drunk in my entire life.
Yes.
It's so delicious, though.
It is dangerous. It's dangerously good.
What's in a coquito?
Yeah.
Monica, you put one together. I don't have it in front of me.
It is the dumbest recipe I've ever seen. It is a can of evaporated milk and a can of condensed milk, which I thought was the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a can of Coco Lopez cream of coconut and a can of coconut milk. Also thought they were the same thing. So it's 4 of the most caloric things. I think it is actually more caloric than butter. When I looked, I was like, it's
I hope
100
so.
calories an ounce. So
nice.
And then
a lot of energy.
Rum, yes, a lot of energy. I'm definitely going to be able to do a triathlon.
The rum is really where the energy is locked in.
That's the locus of the energy.
Normally, I would double the amount of rum, but
yes. Maybe triple even, Monica. Maybe you could even triple it.
Don't limit yourself. Don't buy yourself in.
I might just drink rum out of the empty can of Coco
You know what?
Lopez.
Forget the condensed milk. Forget the coconuts. Just bring that rum over.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought rum was what's inside of coconuts. Like if you're stuck on an island, you find coconuts, you have rum.
God, I wish.
Water. So hopefully everybody took the advice and has one of these delicious cocktails in front of them. But let's find out what you guys have been up to. So let's start with Car and Bird. I'm looking for Friends Against Government, and it seems to have disappeared.
It has indeed disappeared. So after we wrapped up on our Halloween special, which we do every year back in, it drops on October 31st. So I guess since November 1st, we got a letter in the mail from the union that runs our podcast. They were very upset with the fact that we've been saying so many vulgarities and releasing too many bonus episodes. So this all led to, a conflict with the union. They started protesting us. They started putting scab rats outside of our studio. It led to some conflict. Car and I got into some physical fist fights with some of the people. Our other co-host, Aaron, got pinged in the back of the head with a brick. We had to rescue him and get him into a car. And the day that we were recording, the studio was, well, let's just say burned down by the union. It was ransacked. And so our good friend who's here with us, Jacob, took us in on Thanksgiving.
That's right.
We had a delicious Thanksgiving meal with him. And ever since then, we've been, bumbling around the United States looking for a studio to, make our place in. And I think we've settled on a beautiful place up in the Bronx, a great, like a nice studio. And so that's what's been up with us so far. We've been fleeing.
Yes. And so that is the story of how Friends Against Government morphed into Timeline Earth. It was more of an escape story than it was any pre-planned sort of
that's right.
Strategic.
Is this a true story that I'm hearing right now?
It is
absolutely 100% true.
It is as true as the recording button is on. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
That's extraordinary.
The podcasting union?
Yeah. Yeah,
there's many podcasts.
We decided to bring a third guy on, and it turns out that guy convinced us to unionize. He was luring us in with visions of benefits and a pension fund, and it ended up just turning everyone against us. Unfortunately,
yep, it did. It's terrible.
I didn't realize podcasting was so dangerous. Now I'm starting to get a little worried.
Yeah, neither did we. Jeez,
we didn't know what we were getting into.
Crack house in the Bronx. I mean, what?
Yeah.
I don't think it's the union that's the problem.
Now it's not. Well, now we have different problems.
It's just squeezing water developing. In the bag, Monica. It goes one way and then it goes the other. It's just danger all around, really.
Yeah. It's
kind of to the back of the head. Was that part of the story that I heard?
Yeah, a break to the. In fact, we have it on audio.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, he did go out. Listen, we told him, hey, why don't you go and talk to them since you're one of the union members and maybe you can smooth things over. And they bricked him, so we had to save him and get out of there.
And Jake,
studio's burnt.
Jake rescued you?
Well, he took us in, certainly. I noticed he didn't give us a phone call or anything other than, beforehand. But yeah, when we called on him to get us, some help, he was like, yeah, I got the Chillderburg bunker, as he does, which is a beautiful place, Jacob. Really wonderful place.
Great spot.
Yeah. It's amateur podcasting leads to some really interesting scenarios.
Was it burned down by the union members?
We suspect that it was burned down not only by one of the union members, but that several of them have identified themselves on the internet to us. So it was a
true story.
It is as true as the rest of the podcast is, Monica. It is a true story.
It couldn't even be. I mean, it could maybe be true in a world where you guys are actually in the same state.
Well, now we are. Now we are.
And so it's true. We're in the Bronx.
Yeah, we're in the Bronx right now.
Chillderburg is in the Bronx.
Well, we had to go from Pennsylvania, which is where that was, to Chillderburg bunker, into the Bronx. Yeah. Yes.
It's very hard.
What a good travel.
Follow. I tried to listen to the
Monica,
Halloween thing.
Yeah. I think we've decided that with Timeline Earth, we're going to lean into the inside joke. I tweeted this today. Car agreed with me, and I'm really happy about that. I think what we're going to do is we're going to steer the podcast to a point where it's almost entirely inside jokes so that it's completely unapproachable from the outside.
I think you've achieved that already.
Yeah,
no new listeners is our hard.
No new listeners.
I feel like it's no girls allowed. Also, I'm like, they're in the treehouse again.
Well,
shit. Maybe if I smoke pot, they'll let me in. I can roll a joint.
Can you? Is that true?
Can I roll a joint? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Monica's in.
Yeah, I mean,
she's got a leg up on me.
Yeah, me too. I can't do it either.
I was always too lazy. I was just like, just find something to put it in.
No.
Don't worry about rolling.
Right, yeah.
This was my thing. If I had papers and could roll a joint, I never needed to have any pot.
Oh, that's a good point.
So it was a function of skill.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair. Very clever.
Yeah. Monica's thinking.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That New York noggin.
There it is.
Chillderburg, tell us your scene. You've got 2 podcasts working, and Chillderburg is still on, and I am really looking forward to it. So
I'm working on the California in Exile podcast. I still haven't figured out exactly what I want to do with that, but my wife told me she was tired of me talking about California all the time and to go talk on a podcast about it. But that's where I'm from, California originally. Now I'm down here in Texas where I run Chillderburg. We did 2 successful ones despite the state's attempt to shut us down on the second one. Or actually wasn't even really the state. I don't think Texas cares, but Tarrant County, or no, not Tarrant County, whatever county Austin's in. Was not Travis. That's right, Travis County. Yeah, they were not pleased with any gatherings, so we ended up in the county next door near Marble Falls, that Muleshoe Bend recreational area where we enjoyed it so much. We're going to do Chillderburg 3 there. Still working on some of the details, but we're going to have some comedy guests and some music this year, and it's gonna be fun.
Do you have dates? It's the 24th of May. Is that right?
No. It is. I wrote it down, and I already have windows above my my writing down.
My part now, giving out incorrect dates or phone. My part, and then Jacob comes in to save the dates.
Yeah. It's the 20. So it's May 29th through 31st. That's it's a holiday weekend.
Memorial Day. Memorial Day.
Yep. And so hopefully everybody had a really good time last year. Car, you were there. Bird, you weren't able to make it with the lockdowns, but hopefully 3. Hopefully 3 will.
By the way, did you settle on the name Chillderburg 3? But what are we doing as far as the number?
Russian collusion. So it'll be it'll be 3, which is
3
Russian for 3.
What is? Did you say erection collusion?
Russian collusion. Well, that's actually pretty good. That must be what it is.
Binkley, that happens at the event.
It's a veteran of
right. Good. Well, I'll be there then if that's okay. Are you the first California to Texas transplant? Did Joe Rogan follow you?
I mean, he must have followed like half the people out here from California. So
they've been California.
I felt right at home when I got here.
Yeah. Wow.
That's so weak. We were going to move to Austin, but now we can't.
Yeah,
I feel like
it's not cool anymore.
It's nice being from a state that nobody else is really from, because I get totally let off the hook. Like whenever I move somewhere, like they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm from North Carolina." They're like, "Nah, whatever, never mind."
Yeah,
So you weren't escaping anything.
You don't bring anything really strongly one way or the other to the table, so we don't really care.
Before I lived here, Cara and I actually lived pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
I lived in Virginia Beach. He lived in Outer Banks.
I lived in Wilmington for a brief period of time, but Raleigh,
Oh, okay, Raleigh, yeah.
So is Austin still weird or what?
Rollo,
people.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting. Rollo and I were down there for the Bitcoins and Gun conference a couple of weeks. Well, I guess it was a couple months ago at this point. Like time is all distorted now.
Yeah, it really is time.
But we went down to a barbecue joint downtown, and we were, walking, not wearing our masks, because you don't really have to wear masks around here. If you go to the grocery store or inside something, they might make you put it on.
That's how you get a brick to the back of the head, right there. It's that kind of behavior.
California.
That's
well,
right.
I mean, I had it in my pocket. Actually, even when I was in California a couple of weeks ago, the part of California I'm from, there's no masks. Nobody, it's Northern California, so it's extremely rural. I was not at, I'd only put the masks on when somebody asked me, and I was at Raley's in my hometown, Raley's, which is their grocery store. I went in. The only person who asked me to put a mask on was the butcher, and it was only when I went up to the butcher counter. And then he was like, "I don't care if you take it off later." So, and nobody else was wearing masks in the store. It was, my dad and I went to the pizza joint / bar, I guess, and didn't wear masks the entire time there either. Like when we came in, a couple of people looked at us, but they were all not wearing masks. And so we were like, well, we just won't put them on either.
See, the problem here is that everybody's true believers. Like down in LA, they're just true believers. So you can't.
Wait, are you in LA right now?
I'm in LA. I moved to LA.
When was that?
Just this year, my husband.
Wow. Man. I don't think I
know. It's just.
If you're ever moving again, we have a great place in the Bronx if you want to come and join us.
Yeah.
So my mother lives in Rockland County. I have to go there. I'm from Brooklyn.
Maybe you should visit us in the building.
In the burned out studio crack house in the Bronx.
Particularly for women.
Yeah, that's a dangerous place to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's in again. She's in twice. Write that down, Car. Write that down.
Yeah, I got it.
I'll do it.
We're just gonna have to send you a waiver, and if we can just get 2 copies sent back.
Yes. I'm definitely taking my life in my hands. I used to have to bail my brother out of jail in the Bronx quite often.
No, really? Oh my God. The earliest memories that I have of the Bronx, because I'm a Queens kid, and it's funny, but I hadn't gone to the Bronx probably until I was 12 or 13 years old. Just because my dad and I started going to the fish markets in the Bronx, which you have to go to at 3 or 4 in the morning in order to get there on time. And I assume the area where the studio is probably some of the areas where I had to pass through to get to that fish market, because it is still looking rough. And I haven't been there since November, probably. And all I hear is that it's still rough over there. So if you ever wanted some danger and some fun, maybe you could start a commons on the street with a couple of us, just pull out some couches and get drunk on the street. It's probably be a good idea. I think.
Spanish Harlem, they used to do that. But my dad was a meat cutter in Brooklyn. So he used to always go to the meat markets in the wee hours. And one day, I think it was Paul Castellano, something that was gunned down by John Gotti outside of Sparks. And he was watching TV and he was like,
yes.
That's Paul. He's a butcher. Yeah. It's like, what? And he just knew him because they all have front jobs, and he used to be at the meat market every morning. Yeah. It's like, I know that guy. He's a butcher. It's like, I guess that's a good front if you're killing people.
It seems like everybody has a Gotti. My dad taught John Gotti Sr. how to blackfish. Do you know blackfish? You get them in the ocean. They're one of the most fun fish that you can catch. They fly back and forth and they try to rip themselves off of your line. And my dad was the one who taught John Gotti Sr. how to catch those fish. Just a weird, everybody seems to have a John Gotti. Oh yeah, they're delicious. They're really good. But they're a hell of a catch. They fight like they aren't 5 pounds. They fight like they're 30-pound fish. And so I think everybody has a John Gotti story over here. It's like a legend. Yeah, he sure did.
Some people are like, yeah, I don't have a John Gotti fish story, but he did kill half my family.
Yeah, yes.
Right. Now, my dad would tell me, don't ever repeat any of the stories I tell you. And years would go by, decades. And he said, if you ever mention that person's name, always follow it with was a really nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
John and his son and the whole Gotti family are wonderful people.
Really nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard really nice guy.
Yes.
So,
Carv, you ever been to New York?
Yeah, my mom's from Jersey City.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
oh.
Well, wait a minute. He's in New York. What are you talking about? Stop doing this.
And also recording.
What a great character.
Well, I wasn't sure if you considered the Bronx part of New York still, or if it was like, if I heard the boroughs were trying to like split up and become their own cities.
God, I wish, my friend. I sure wish. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like everybody's getting more and more dependent on Manhattan as long as this thing continues to go on.
Do you think they're maybe emptying the city out for like kind of the way they crash the market and then they just buy it up?
No doubt in my mind. Me and my father were talking about this the other day, and he was the one who put it in my hand. He's seen this a million times before in the city. I mean, this is exactly the time when all the poor people have to leave, all the rich people in the new businesses and the small businesses die, the new big businesses come in, all the rich people come in. Yeah, it's the occasional wash in, wash out that this city does. Yes, I say it, and it doesn't sound like it's as unfortunate as it is, but it is really a terrible, terrible thing that happens in the city.
And it's kind of like Crisis in Leviathan, where it's not like it ever gets back to where it's cool. I remember every single time it leveled up, because I am from New York. I worked in New York. I lived in New York. And the first time I worked in New York, there were no McDonald's at all. Mm-hmm. And then there were McDonald's. I'm like, who's going to McDonald's? Who would ever go to McDonald's? And I realized it was like the people I went to college with who got jobs in New York, but were from New York. And then after 9/11, it leveled up again to where there were I think there were fence gates on the street corners, so you couldn't cross whenever you wanted. Yeah. And then I can't remember the timeline exactly, but I remember between Giuliani and Bloomberg, they got rid of smoking in bars, which that
was all Bloomberg. Yeah. Giuliani was the one who was responsible for getting all of the poor and homeless out. That was his big move. Where did they all go?
People like that about him.
Yeah, I wonder where all those people went, frankly. But yeah, Bloomberg came in and he did the drink tax was his big thing. And yeah, and all of the putting up barriers and fencing, and every building in the city has to have a scaffolding on it now, so you can't even appreciate it anymore. It's terrible.
All of them?
No, not all of them, but even minor work, or even if work is needed, there has to be scaffolding up. So half the city is covered in scaffolding.
That is just so tacky. And then also the traffic got to the point where, as soon as it got to the point, I was a surface dweller. I don't like the subway. Mm-hmm. So as soon as I got
not now, especially.
Yeah, where people could walk faster than the cabs, really get there faster than the cabs.
Yes.
I can't hack it anymore.
No.
It's just too much. I can't take it. I can't take it.
When my wife and I first started dating, she lived in Brooklyn, and I would go up and see her, and it was such a culture shock going from living in rural California to living in Virginia Beach, which going to Virginia Beach was a big thing for me because that was a city to me. And then going up to New York, and that I've been in 2 fights as an adult. They were both in New York City.
Sure. I've been more than I can count on both of my hands for no good reason.
My Brooklyn cousins call Manhattan the city.
Yes.
They don't think they live in the city, and they don't have or know anyone who has grass.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't think they live in the city. Nothing concrete.
Yeah, I do that too. Actually, now that I think about it, I also refer to it as the city.
Right.
Despite the fact that
grass.
Well, Queens is a little grassier, but it's also a little assier too, if you know what I mean.
They go hand in hand, don't they?
They sure do.
Often one leads to the other.
So,
Car, could you bump your audio up a hair?
I sure can.
Yeah.
Thanks. See that beautiful voice.
I don't want you to break character, and I don't want to get serious, but I do have a question that derives from why I named this episode, whatever, this SWAPCAST, how I found freedom in an unfree holiday season. Because the great Harry Brown wrote the book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. Have you guys read that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They have. I have not.
Okay. It's a very easy read, but he basically says, don't break the law. Like, don't do what Irwin Schiff did, because then you'll go to jail and you're not free when you're in jail.
Right.
And it's just like, don't do stupid things. Just make the most of this situation. And it always kind of did not. I love him, but he has the greatest definition of libertarianism. He says that you should never define libertarianism in terms of conservative or liberal. Just is it personal? I always switch it around.
That's why we're all the only real libertarians.
Yes,
right. Individual.
Well, me, but yes,
right. Oh no, I mean, I was off the whole corporate libertarianism thing a long time ago, to the point where I don't even get the jokes, about the Libertarian Party or whatever.
Yeah.
But I always wondered about his take, because I thought, okay, well, you're kind of just putting your head in the sand and things are going to get worse. And then it's going to be too late. And I feel like here we are, things got worse. It is too late. And now I'm finally on his side saying, I really don't think there's anything I can do at all now besides either grow food for as long as they allow that. And I mean that. And then, or just, I'm about ready to just accept it. But I always feel like Binkley and I were talking about from the beginning, when people would say, Gates or whoever would say, just, you're only making it worse by not accepting it. And we had a Jeopardy category, things a rapist would say.
Oh my God.
Oh God.
Oh, that's like one of our game shows.
Oh, that's horrible. That's worse than our game shows.
It's true. That's what these guys talk about. It's like,
it's a bunch of stuff Klaus Schwab says it ends up being.
Jesus.
Oh man.
But I'm ready to accept it. Like I'm ready to take the bit to, get changed to the radiator, whatever it is that they need to do. I just, just give me my bowl of food. I'll be happy with that. I don't want, I'm not literally going to be happy with it. I'm just saying I kind of am back where Harry Brown was, except for I think Harry Brown was premature. And if he had had better advice, maybe we wouldn't be here. But I don't know. I mean, do we accept? What's the story? What's the plan?
Do you mind if I take this away?
Please do.
Is it going to be about Bitcoin?
Well, it's partially, but not entirely. No, it's going to be about attitude. It's going to be.
Car, I was waiting if she was going to ask me, what do you think, Bert? I was going to go, I defer to Car on this, because we've talked about this a million times.
First, Binkley, is my audio okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So I have been kind of low key bringing up this running bit on Twitter that I run my own country, the Carcadian Empire, which is my little 8-acre plot in North Texas, which is a joke, obviously, but it's kind of like an interesting attitude to just be like, okay, and I'll just be like, well, we didn't really do the mask mandates here in Carcadia. And it turns out that it worked out pretty well, and I'll have like all of these different regulations or whatever that I decided not to enact, and it worked out pretty well here. And so I think that thinking about yourself in the spirit of Harry Brown, kind of thinking about yourself as a separate country or your own person is a great way to start to look at it. And that obviously butts up against some harsh reality at some time. And I think that Harry Brown fell more on the what some may say bury your head in the sand style, and I definitely don't fall in that category, partially because I don't have a family, I don't have anyone that depends on me, so I don't really care that much. But at the beginning of the COVID thing, actually, so Jacob and I live Chillderburg and I live like 20 minutes from each other, so we would have lunch every now and then during the COVID thing. We've believed the same thing through the entire thing, and I had made the determination I'm going to continue to live my life the way that I see fit. When they issued curfews, I said, I'm not going to obey the curfew. When they issued mask mandates, I'm not going to obey the mask mandate unless the private business that I'm going to requests that I obey it. And I'm just going to continue to live my life, because in Carcadia, we don't have these things. So what I had kind of determined was saying, if I'm going to get pulled over outside a curfew, or if I'm going to get pulled over or hassled about a mask, I want that ticket. I want to go to jail. I want you to put your name on it. I want somebody to put their name on it. I am not going to police myself. You have to police me. I'm not going to do it myself. And I think that because they don't have the resources if a lot of people have that attitude.
Yeah, I love that attitude. And we're just renting here. I immediately started making plans to move to Austin. I was looking at places in Austin.
Yeah.
Then I heard Joe Rogan was moving to Austin. So then I switched to Montana. But our friend Bill Loby, who does Neighbors Feed and Seed, called me. He's like, you cannot move to Montana because it's very cold there. And you don't know how to grow anything. And like those places don't even have water and electricity. Like you're just going too far, Brooklyn girl. It's like, okay. So, but here, I know a guy here who I think he has like 13 kids and he owns an Irish pub. And this place locked down like Friday the 13th in March.
Yeah.
And he had a St. Patrick's Day party anyway.
Good.
And he was last I heard he was facing 90 days in jail, and who knows if he'll lose his liquor license. And I don't know. So I like that. They wrote about him in the Wall Street Journal. So he got some coverage, but it's, is it going to change anything, or is it just his being able to like tell St. Peter, hey man, I did my part and that's what I'm here for?
Well, here would be my rebuttal as the man of the household. What's his alternative? I mean, if he's unable to protect and provide while sitting on the couch without a restaurant, what's the difference of sitting in jail without a restaurant to provide for his family? You know, I mean, there is a difference. Like, obviously, he's away from his family, but like,
no, you're right. You're right.
What the hell's the difference?
There's a bigger problem, actually, now that you mention it, which is that he probably has to. I don't think he has to. I don't know anything about his financial situation. Like, this could be his life's work and it's all up in smoke. He hasn't been able to open it in all this time. And if he had any cushion, I just don't know. Maybe he got lured into taking a loan. But if he's in this position where he's absolutely desperate, it's kind of like the mob with the carrot and the stick. Like, you might have to take their money, right? He might have no money at all. And they're like, we're giving you this $1,200 card that you can buy food for your family, and you're going to take it. And now we own your soul. Yep. And they had to take the money. And I had an uncle who was a priest, and I would ask him, I was like, my father would say, you can't get a Social Security card because it's the mark of the beast. It's like, I gotta work. He said, don't do that, And my uncle said, if they force you, it's not really your moral bad, but maybe it is. Maybe it is, because what's force? When is it force?
Oh yeah. And I mean, like, to circle back, just to make sure, that comparing my situation to his is like ridiculous. Like, I mean, when you have 13 dependents and you have like, I've got a very good cushion, and I have nobody depending on me. If I go to jail for a month, I mean, other than just the misery of sitting in jail, it doesn't really fucking matter, I mean, so I don't know.
No, I'm not. I've always thought that like, if you don't have dependents, you have more freedom. But I also think when you have dependents, you have a certain responsibility to be prepared for that. And I just didn't, this year, it came to me that I didn't realize that I was so totally dependent on the whims of the government, and probably because I didn't anticipate a complete worldwide lockdown at once. So I have Irish citizenship. My son has Down syndrome. I immediately got everybody Irish citizenship because I was like, oh, wow, he might not make it. The Pope Benedict, when he was born, lost a cousin to the Nazis who had Down syndrome. I was like, we're going where they're going to come for them last. Yeah. And I just didn't anticipate that every place on earth would do this crazy stuff. Like, it almost makes me think that we're looking behind the scenes at like a much, much more powerful central entity than I ever anticipated.
The thing about dependents that you were saying a moment ago, those guys in restaurants and the guys that are standing up that have the big families that we were talking about, it's also a behavioral modeling thing for their kids. If they want their kids not to submit to this stuff, they want their kids to do the same thing, to fight against it when they get older. It's creating the next generation of libertarians, so to speak.
That's true. And they're religious, those guys. So they care more about that, which I think out here, the reason that people are so absolutely cowed by a threat to their physical integrity is that they're obsessed with it as the only thing they have.
Yeah.
For better or worse. Like you have so much more control over people when you control their physical well-being, and that's the only thing they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, it is very much kind of what you're saying too on that same thing is like, disappointed is not the correct word, but like I am shocked at how much. And Carr, actually, just a couple of months into this, you and I were talking about it when you came over for cheesesteaks.
Yep.
I'm just shocked at how readily everybody went along with it, where they're just like, okay, like, yeah. And you're like, really? Like, I mean, and now granted, like, what else are you going to do? I mean, cause I was talking to my wife about this a couple of days ago too, where I was like, well, we kind of went along with it too, to some degree. I mean, but what else were we going to do? I mean, especially at the beginning of this, we went driving around looking for places to go. Everything was closed. So like we were out going places, but there was nothing to do. We couldn't go to a restaurant or anything like that. And we've done some things to kind of mock it a little bit. Like, she wears, instead of a mask, she wears a silly hat with a propeller on it and a visor. And, like I have a captain's hat that I wear that has a visor. And, we've been kicked out of a couple of places where like, those aren't the proper masks. And then I make up stuff too about like, I'm like, this is compliant with Texas regulation and stuff like that, which they don't, nobody knows what the regulation is. I'm like, this is compliant. It covers my nose and my mouth. That's all the regulation says. And they're like, I don't think so. And actually I used one of your lines the other day, Monica, where we went in and my wife was wearing a different visor, but it was one that like goes on her chin. It's just clear because she didn't want to mess up her makeup. And this is when I think, Carr, I didn't text you. I texted the other group about it. They kicked us out because it was the wrong mask. Out of the art museum, which I paid for.
The art museum is the hidden gem of this.
Yeah, right.
The intolerance level.
Kicked her out because they thought she took some modern art and attached it to her.
She was expressing herself.
Monica, you just stole my word. I was literally about to go the intolerant left.
Well, they kicked the guy off a plane. He had a face shield on, and they wanted him to also put on a mask, and they had to physically drag him off the plane. Can you imagine being so cautious that you put on a freaking face shield and then you still get kicked off the plane?
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, this is what the guy, we go in and I'm probably embellishing this story because I always embellish things in my head, but we go in and the guy is like, ma'am, you can't wear that mask. And like, I just kind of stepped in front and was like, oh, she doesn't really speak English. And,
based.
Yeah, based. And I was like,
also neither do I.
Yeah, but she has an exemption. And he goes, there are no exemptions. And I went, excuse me? And he said, there are no exemptions for this facility. And I said, this is a public facility, right? And he says, yes. And I said, well, I guess we're not seeing the art exhibit, but I hope you're familiar with the Americans with Disability Act. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, sir, I don't know about that. You have to go. And I was like, all right, we'll leave. But, I have nothing else to say. Like,
did you win? You didn't win.
No, he just.
No.
This
is
something
else. Artists not wanting people to come in. Like artists need people to come see their stuff for them to tell people to go elsewhere.
Because they were
crazy.
Thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
They were thinking slightly out. They were coloring slightly outside the lines, and they got slapped down.
I can imagine an improv show with 6 audience members only already. 3 more come to the door and go, no, we're going to send what would be 33% of our audience away because they're not wearing a mask. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, but it's a city museum too. It's like, I mean, I got like a refund. And my wife and I debated this while we were leaving. We ended up going to Home Goods instead. Walking around is just as good, but it was a store, and so like you go to the store and they don't care as much. But like I'm thinking about it, and like I don't know how I would approach this complaint. It's one of those things where I'm like, I should have become a lawyer because I would make so much trouble for so many people.
The problem is there's no real law.
No, there's not.
It's just like I don't even know what it is. It's like that was the thing we were talking about, Jacob, like that, like early on where I was like, before this all started, I had kind of a different view of having local and state governance. And then once this thing started happening, it seemed like there were edicts or random decrees coming from all different directions. And you're like, how do you even begin to fight this in court? Because I don't even think this is legal. It's just bullying. So what law is it? I don't know that it is a law.
Yeah, and it's not. It's like mandate.
It's just some guy said something, and the police are following him, so everybody has to follow it.
And this wasn't even the police; it was just some old geriatric security guard.
And that's the thing. It's older people and low-wage workers, like people, baristas and servers that are being put in a position where they have to enforce these mask policies. They're not conflict resolution experts. They'd be doing conflict resolution if that were the case. But the people in power are hiding behind these people who are just putting them in a tough situation.
Yeah. Great.
And I do sort of to some degree feel bad about that. Like, well, you weren't there, Carl. This was when Jared and Will from Peaceful Treason podcast.
Yeah, the pizza place.
When they were saying, the pizza place. When we went in there and none of us were wearing masks, and the lady was like, well, you gotta wear masks to come in. And Jared goes, well, we're already in. And she goes, yeah, but you've got to wear masks to come in. And he goes, yeah, but we're already in. We're already in the store. And she's exactly. He just goes, so, and she's like, you got to have a mask. She didn't know what to do. And Jared,
broker programming.
The virus gives you a 30-second to minute window before it releases itself. You can put on a mask once you enter.
Well, and we went down to the QT and grabbed a mask because I wanted pizza. So we went and got a mask and came back. Literally, we walked further to like the hostess station, then like past more tables to the hostess station than it was from the hostess station to where they sat us. And so the first time we came in, we had already walked past like a bunch of people sitting down. So like,
you contaminated.
It made no sense. So and none of this does. That's
doesn't make And then there's something more exaggerated than I've ever seen before, although I saw it with the criminal justice stuff with Bill Cosby and Lori Loughlin, and even just plea bargains in general. Like you can make an argument, you can have law on your side, and you can have logic on your side, but the way they manipulate the system, you're never going to win. They're going to throw the book at you, you're going to plea bargain, whatever. But the latest example, it's not just the COVID stuff. I don't even have a specific example with that. It's or LA did fight and win that the local regulation to close the restaurants had no basis in reality and science. And the judge said, you're right. But the state law supersedes the local law anyway. So it's staying closed. And it's like, but it still doesn't make sense. But what happened in Georgia with the election, we talked to this election integrity activist, Garland Favorito, who we always knew from when we were on the radio. And he's absolutely, I mean, it is the stuff that he has on the election irregularities are not resolved. He's made complaints. It's very clear. He's presented before the legislative bodies. The Secretary of State, the governor, everybody's Republican. They know him. He's got them dead to rights, and they're just dropping it. Yeah. And I mean, there's no law. There's no law. There's no rule of law anymore. Of course, the law rules us, but the rulers are not ruled by the rule of law.
Well, and I think that's kind of back to the point that was made earlier, is that this, I think you're right. This is just sort of the veil has been lifted, and now it's like, you see how the sausage is made. It's clear that it's all been bullshit all along. So
and putting it out there, and people are still putting up with it. I think that it's what will they put up with will continue to reveal the method until it's stopped.
But I would say, and I don't know, I mean, you can't speak for everywhere, but I would say, like, I think that there are hot spots where people are really abiding by it, but like where me and Jacob are, and particularly the further west you go in the Metroplex and DFW, it's like the less anybody cares. And so it's kind of like
Dallas is pretty hard.
Dallas is insane. Fort Worth is not insane.
Fort Worth is fine, except for the stupid art museum. But
the actual states on party lines. It's about leadership. And when Binkley plays us these clips, when they're plotting these things, they talk openly over and over again about, they do studies on who people follow and trust. And they're like, oh, we were surprised to find that employers are some of the most trusted people in a person's life. So we need to make sure the employers tell people how to behave. I mean, it's sick. And they really focus on faith leaders. And this time they were talking like the eventual one thing. This time they were talking about frontline healthcare workers.
We just did a panel discussion on getting to the faith leaders yesterday.
But this was October 2019.
If I hear frontline workers one more time, I'm going to freak out. I cannot hear that sentence anymore.
I love it. I love that. I love that phrase. I love specifically the phrase Dr. Anthony Fauci and the frontline healthcare workers.
Because he's the leader out front.
He is the unelected, unappointed, hasn't worked on the front lines during this entire thing.
No, he's just been hanging out at a Washington Nationals game.
That's why they had to separate him out from actually the frontline workers category.
Right. Yes.
He goes around saying literally the opposite things to different.
It's insane to me that he says one thing one day and then he says the opposite the next day. And Andrew Cuomo goes, yeah, he's right. Both days, man. Right. Both days. And I'm going, what?
It's the whole thing has just been how many layers of obvious bullshit can you stack on top? And that's the funny thing, too, is that like when we were talking about like edicts and laws and whatever is like, there will be one edict that comes in from some level of government and then another edict that comes in from another level of government. And it leaves people being like, well, I don't even really know which bullshit edict is legitimate. I mean, neither of them are, obviously, but like, which one do I follow? And like, it's just this complete cluster where you're like, I don't.
Well, and there might be this is something that Mason and I on Tasting Anarchy sometimes talk about, is that sometimes it's a good thing when things are like ridiculously confusing like that, because at a certain point you're just like,
you just make your own rule.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know. And we've been doing that to some degree, like with Chillderburg, it's like, they wanted us to cancel it, but I thought at the time it was really important to do it. And it ended up being a lot of fun. But like we had Killdozer Day here. We had Ron Paul Day. I did Friendsgiving here at my house. We're going to be doing a Home Alone night on the 26th. And then we have Ukrainian Christmas on January 8th. So like I'm getting people together whenever I can, because I think a lot of people are sort of community starved to some degree. And that's really been my role in like the Liberty Movement ever since I was like 19 or 20, was some sort of organizing to get people to do stuff together. Because I like it, and I'm pretty introverted, but I'm good at, as long as like I've set it up and I control it to some degree, I'm a little dictator. I feel a lot better about it. So,
not enough libertarians have that little knack. So,
Jacob, I don't know if it's occurred to you, Jacob, but you're like literally saving people's lives more than most people during the
Jacob crushes that role. Trust me, he's like that. Because I'm the exact opposite. I cannot organize. I can't keep it.
No, but you're the face.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What are you, Bird?
Fauci of the organization.
And it's true. It's like you say, like Carr Campett of the podcast formerly known as the SWAPCAST will be there, and then he doesn't really show up, but other people do. So.
And they're like, Jacob will text me like, "Hey, dude, are you coming?" I'm like, "Dude, I totally zoned, man. I totally zoned on that."
But I think, and also just the type of people that are in the Liberty Movement and to keep them cohesive. And I think this is also sort of on that Freedom Cells. John Bush put together that Freedom Cell thing. It's sort of a similar thing, is that people who are involved in the libertarian movement tend to be very introverted and in a lot of ways very strange. And I'm that way as well. And they very, very much appreciate meeting up with other people who have similar interests, but it also gives you an opportunity to realize who's in your area, who you can count on, who it's okay to talk about these ideas with. I mean, like at my job, everybody knows my political beliefs. I'm not super quiet about it, but like I know that at my old job, I showed up on day one with a big sticker that said payroll tax with a line through it on the back of my car, and it was at a payroll company. So, and my then new boss like comes in and he's like, "Whose car is that outside with the thing?"
Oh my
like,
God.
Mine. Yeah, he was mad, and then he was like, "You got to park around the corner from now on." And I was like,
he didn't say you're right. He must have known you were right.
Oh, he makes so much money off of it. He knew I was right. Like all my points were correct, but like the amount of the whole industry only exists because of payroll tax. Nobody would pay their payroll with a payroll company if it wasn't for how complicated payroll tax is.
Yes.
So they would just write a check because that's really what paying is supposed to be. It's like, oh, we agreed to just $5 an hour. How many hours did you work? Click, and then you give them a check. But now it's like, no, you got to take this amount out, and the employer's got to pay this amount, and then because you get tax deductions because of 401k, that's got to be run through payroll, and then ACA was added onto that, and like, I mean, it became this crazy beast. I mean, it's a really interesting world to work in when you have like the ideas that we have, because you're just like, this whole thing is a huge scam, and but you're still doing it.
The ones against,
it's just it's like it's the amount of, like, when the ACA went in. This is a whole side tangent, but when the ACA went in, the amount, because I'm a software developer, the amount of labor that went into getting people into compliance for that, which is a part of the ACA argument that people don't really talk a whole lot about. It's not just the fees and stuff like that for not doing it. It's the cost of compliance is astronomical.
Really?
It's like an additional, I think we were charging something like $2.50 per employee per paycheck just for the data recording. And then compiling the data and submitting it to the IRS was this other huge fee. And I mean, we made tons and tons of money on it in the payroll industry. And that's one of the reasons why the big payroll lobbies were pushing for it, because they knew.
It's the classic regulatory barriers to entry. People are like, oh yeah, big tech is going to get theirs. They're going to get regulated. I'm like, Facebook shares go up when they talk about that. I mean, no one. I mean, I think Marlboro was behind limiting tobacco advertising.
Yeah, and then as soon as that went through, they bought up every little tobacco company, and because they all went out of business. There was there's those laws too. Those Indian cigarettes that they used to sell here years before I was old enough to remember, but they used to sell these Indian cigarettes for like 50 cents each or something, or like less than that. It was it's like 5 cents each or something. And then they made those illegal because they're from outside the United States. They're unregulated. And that was part of Philip Morris lobbying to, like, because people started buying these cigarettes for like ridiculously cheap. They're the same thing. They're actually probably better for you because they're just tobacco. So instead of all the other stuff they put in them.
That's why I don't like the whole regulating pot. Like, don't regulate it. What do you have to regulate? It's a weed. It grows up out of the grass. Like, that's the one that you don't want people smoking.
Are they still talking about that legislation, by the way?
Not in Carcadia.
Details of that?
Carcadia has actually legalized it. So
Carcadia had it legalized.
We legalized it recently on Carcadia.
Oh, recently? Oh, wow.
Well, 3 years ago when we established.
That's so progressive of you, of Carcadia.
Has George Soros been banned from Carcadia?
He is not allowed. He is not allowed anymore.
Wow. Oh, so you are putting your borders up.
Put my foot down.
Really? So you are issuing Carcadian visas anytime soon? Anything like that?
Sure. Just sign your name.
Mm-hmm. And that's it.
And you're and I'll just do a quick check against George Soros' name, and if it's not George Soros, you're in. I see this is not George Soros. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, I don't know the details of the legislation too. I do know the details of the legislation. What I don't know is whether or not it's still being considered. The thing that troubles me is that they're attaching taxes to it. It's not a full legalization bill to begin with. If I remember the details of it, it is only legalization in certain circumstances. So it's not a descheduling, which is
they're legalizing it, but you can still go to jail.
Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. As long as it doesn't come off that register, it doesn't matter.
It's sort of like those PCR tests. If you want a positive result, you just turn up the cycles.
Yes.
But in this case, if you want more slave laborers, you just enforce the laws that are on the books, and then you get more slave laborers.
I frankly am hoping that there's a move to get to remit all of the sentences of people who are arrested for it, but keep it illegal, because now that New Jersey has it legal and New York doesn't, it's been cheaper than ever. This is the best. So
in New York,
it's illegal. In New Jersey, it's completely legal, and the prices dropped.
Yeah,
it's cheap now. It's cheaper now. Right. It's even cheaper now. So I'm whatever you want to do. Like Carr said, I mean, it hasn't been illegal to me. Yeah. So
it's been fairly legal on Carcadia,
especially around 2:30 in the morning. Or so.
It's around. You can find it in the drawer in the kitchen, for example.
It's funny. I was thinking while you guys were talking, and I really admire Jared, Will, and Jake, your little stunt in the pizzeria, because I did one myself, very similar, where I didn't have a mask, walked into I guess you'd call it a bar, but it's not so much a bar as it is a sit-down eat place with a big bar in it. And the guy was like, hey, you got to put a mask on. Didn't have a mask. I was wearing a T-shirt. I pulled the T-shirt up over my face, and you just see my stomach out now. And I go, is that okay?
Yeah.
That's all I could do. I ended up getting what I needed in the most tedious way possible. But, you know, I don't care. I've always been the kind of like bow my head towards you while I have a knife in the back of my hand type of situation. Like, I don't really care about, you know, if you want me to wear a mask, it's on. Don't care. Right. Doesn't make a difference ultimately to me, because I'm going to take it off at some point. It's really funny how all three of the co-hosts of Timeline Earth have taken a completely individual stance on this, where Cars is, I'm just not doing it. Mine is, yeah, I'll do it as long as you can see me. And Aaron's is, not only will I not do it, but I'm just going to start coughing in public at people.
Well, Aaron is very confrontational.
Oh, it's amazing. It's great. Yeah. I think all three methods are how you live freer in an unfree world, but to bring it back, how you live funnier in an unfree world, pull that shirt up, stand in the pizzeria and go, what are you talking about? I'm already here.
Let that gut fly.
Yeah. I was talking with Lee, N Block Press at N Block Press. Me and Lee have been talking for a while about ways that we can make politics work for us. And what we've realized that the politics of shame and the politics of embarrassment work a lot more than the politics of fear. And so when you put people into situations where, and it's for all the libertarians, not a nap bio to embarrass somebody, perfectly fine. If they can't take it, it's them. If you can just embarrass people into, you know, I'm in the middle of the store already.
In a restaurant.
Yeah, or anything. You can get people to do anything if you embarrass them enough. So you walk into a restaurant, they go, you got to put a mask on. Oh, I don't have a mask, or you know, and then they go, okay, well, you got to go get a mask or something. Take your shoe off and put it on your mouth or something. Be ridiculous. Be insane. That's how you truly live.
Underwear on her face in the TikTok video.
Incredible stuff. Those people. There's not a single person, and I've seen multiple pictures of people wearing underwear on their face. Not a single one of those people is doing that unintentionally. They're all doing that on purpose because it's hilarious and because they're getting away with, yeah, I guess I have to put something on my face, but I'm going to make a mockery out of it while I do it. You know, there are people who are selling masks that say don't wear a mask on them, and I just go, that's ridiculous. I don't understand that at all. Yeah. Just put the underwear on your face. Seriously.
Right.
I got a big plague mask that a listener made. It's a giant plague mask.
I bought one yesterday. I bought one last night. A little plastic plague doctor mask that I intend to walk into at least one business establishment with.
Do you have yours handy, Binkley?
Yeah, I'll get it. I'll show it to you.
Binkley loves my son who has Down syndrome. When this first started, like, he wasn't trying to be funny. He just had no idea what we were talking about. And we're in the car. I'm like, do you have your mask? And he's like, oh, no, let me go get it. So he ran back at the house and he comes out with a werewolf mask.
Yeah, see? But it's stuff like that.
We were good with it. We're like, fine.
Yeah.
What's funnier than if you're already in prison, peeing on the prison guard's shower, peeing on the prison guard's leg in the shower, or so? Oh my God! Look at that mask.
It's horrifying. Made out of a gourd.
Is it really?
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
That'll protect you from diseases.
Now. You can't hear me. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Awesome. Yeah, it's got giant holes here, so it's really not protecting anything. But I haven't gotten questioned yet. I have worn it a couple of times.
It's protecting you in the sense that nobody would want to be anywhere near you.
Yeah, that's true.
Try to go to customer service and just ask a lot of questions.
Right.
You have that little spittle dripping off the nose thing. You know, like, just like, whatever.
All right. Here, jeez.
It's a phrase that we haven't really said in a while, but keep the timeline weird is a legitimate axiom to live by, I think.
Yeah. Fair
Well, you know,
I think everybody on the set of Mission Impossible 7 should show up tomorrow without mask on just to see if Tom Cruise just loses this shit completely. Although I think his little thing was a publicity stunt. I don't know if you guys saw that story.
I
saw audio of him. Yeah. Just yelling at people. You gotta wear a fucking mask on this set. I've got so much invested in this. We're the example for Hollywood. You're going to wear it or you're fired. It was totally Tom Cruise angry monologue like he gives in every single movie, except it was directed at like a couple of gaffers or something on set who didn't have their mask on.
I literally can't imagine Tom Cruise yelling at me and not laughing the entire
I know.
I'm saying ridiculous. You're like, he's my height, which just makes it really funny to me. Like he's trying to yell like he's taller, but dude, you're my height. You're not. You can't yell like that.
Can you imagine him yelling at Jacob?
yeah, yelling upwards.
You're 7 feet tall, Jacob.
I'm 6'5".
6'5".
See,
Jacob's
that's 1 inch too tall. You know that, right?
What's that?
That's just 1 inch too tall.
Oh, is it 1 inch too tall?
Yeah, like 5.
He's going. He's going. It's 1 inch not tall enough.
No, it just gets weird at that point.
Did you play basketball?
Yeah, there is. No, I didn't. I never played any sports. I swam and I wrestled, but I never played any like height advantage sports. I guess swimming kind of, but I never played any. I was never
wrestling. You must have had to get so skinny.
I actually wrestled in at the time, the heaviest weight class that was available to me. And there was like one other person in the weight class. So I just always wrestled the same guy.
Oh, nice. Me and my buddy.
Yeah. Did you win?
I was so bad. I'm not a very aggressive person. I'm pretty, it's very hard for me to be aggressive. So I was never good at aggressive type sports. So I wish I had been better. I think I'd be better at it now because I understand it. I understand turning on, being aggressive and turning it off. Whereas like when I was a kid, like I just didn't want to, I just was not.
Understanding stuff makes such a difference. Like the older I get, I don't know what it is. It has to be like in your brain, it stops. The chaos kind of like clears and you see the patterns better. And then you can figure out how to learn. So I try to tell my kids, like, I don't know how this works, but I'm like, oh, just look at it and think about it. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like literally you can take your car, just look at it and think about it.
Yeah. And
it works for me now, but like it never would work before. But yeah, now I feel like I look back, I could probably have done anything I wanted, even something I was bad at by nature, just by realizing that if anybody can do it, it's how complicated could anything be? That's why I get so frustrated with this argument that you could never understand this policy.
Foreign policy.
Yeah.
That's what the elites say. These idiots can't understand foreign policy, so we'll keep them fighting over the domestic stuff while we put our own foreign policy.
Oh, and you kind of get that same sort of thing from like people, I guess, on the far left or whatever, where they'll be like, well, you can't understand it because you have a intact family life and like your parents are still together or whatever it is you can't understand it because you're not whatever category we're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not either. So how can you understand it?
And they always actually, like every one of those arguments are very myopic. Like you get really, really close. And my mantra has always been, if you step back anytime, because when I had the radio show on the radio, people just wanted to talk about policy. And I was like, I'm never going to learn about your policy, but what I will do is look at the policy that created this problem. And then we could just peel that back and you could always get to that point, to the point where I'm an anarchist. However, so I used to be, until very recently, not really thought too hard about the anarcho-capitalist handle until I kind of concluded that capital is, I always thought of capital as like you convert your labor into little gold bits and then you trade it to other people who put their labor into gold bits. And it's just great. It's perfect. It's like a leakless system. And then, but it's not, because that's not what capital is anymore. And it just took me so long to think of that until like right now in the here and now, when I see that I have absolutely no control over my physical well-being because this capital thing, I converted all of my labor into capital and it just kind of dissipated into the system. So now I want to be an agorist, but
I was going to say, you converted all of your labor unfortunately into fiat capital.
Yeah, no, I know. I just didn't think that hard. Like, I completely relied on this like super complex system as not being something that they could literally just snap their fingers and negate all the laws of economics, of law, of like the germ theories they were telling. They just snap their fingers and it all goes away. And I just
follow the science. That's all they say.
Just
follow the science.
Follow the science. But those priests, you know, they keep the science in the Greek and you can't read it because you're too stupid and all that kind of stuff. So you have to trust them. But I feel like I've kind of migrated. I don't know if you remember Joe Sobran, I think it was. Yeah, Joseph Sobran. He used to call himself a philosophical anarchist. So he was engaged in politics, but he knew, you know, it was his moment for him like it is for me. And he was just like, I'm not really an anarchist. I'm not going all the way, but I get it. And it's right. I'm just not there yet. But like with the agorism, I really don't know how. I mean, I have my son has Down syndrome, and it's very like, you know, I don't have a lot of freedom. You know, I don't have a lot of flexibility. I've made this world the way it is for myself, reliant on assumptions that have all been negated. So I'm trying to transition to philosophical agorism and then actual agorism. But this is where I get kind of hopeless because I don't live in Carcadia, and
you certainly can.
You can live in
Monacobia. Monaco.
I would like to live in Monaco. Yeah. I don't even own the house I live in. I got nothing.
You got a contract, right?
I think this was one of the things that made that Car, I don't remember what show it was, but I do remember it was years in my conversation. It might have been on our show the first time you came on, and we had your famous box wine. Brought box wine spritzer, but we talked about this and you guys had on, or maybe you were on Rollo's show or something like that with somebody who was an agorist, and they were talking about like avoiding toll roads and stuff like that. And like, I hated that episode. I was like, this is the most impractical, most aggravating, like, virtue signal from the side that I agree with kind of thing, where you're like, well, I'm going to go around 20 miles out of my way to avoid the toll road. And you're like, man, you know, but it was kind of when I was kind of thinking about it more was, it was, my wife is bringing me wine. But I was thinking that kind of agorism is and I've read Konkin and stuff like that. And so he does make a lot of really good points, but, a lot of it's aesthetics, I think, is that like the people that you meet that call themselves agorists usually are people who are just into kind of the hippie in kind of the hippie sort of wing of libertarianism, which like I would say I'm a little bit there too, but I like living in the suburbs. I kind of like having a pool. I like this life. I want to recreate that in a place where I know my community. Like, I grew up in a neighborhood where like I knew pretty much everybody. We went out and played, and we didn't have anybody telling us, you know, that, you know, we knew who to avoid, who not to avoid, and that kind of stuff. And that's sort of what we really kind of what the California Next Out podcast has had its main stuff about is Chillderburg town, intentional community building. And so we've been doing a lot of our long episodes about the different intentional communities, what might or might not work. And there was this project a couple of years ago, it's still going on, called Open Source Ecology. And so I kind of want to take that sort of idea and do basically open source intentional communities, where it basically just has the instructions. This is how we set it up. This is how much it costs in this location. And this is what worked for us. And then other people can kind of do that same thing. And it's growing and growing and growing. The number of people who are like, we've got to get out of the city, or we've got to get out of like wherever the heck they are, that it's not working out for them, and go someplace where they don't need to ask permission to walk out of their house without a mask on, kind of thing. Like it's being able to build a community with people, you know, like this is actually something that Malice always brings up a lot, is that back when when it was starting to become okay to be homosexual, was that it's very easy to say it's illegal to be homosexual if you don't know anybody who's gay. Mm-hmm. But when you're like, oh, that guy who helped me rake my leaves up, who lives down the street and is super nice, is also gay, then you kind of go like, oh, I don't want to legislate against them. And when we first moved into this neighborhood, I went around to the houses and tried to say hi to everybody. Everybody thought I was a weirdo. And like, but I mean, that's just how I was.
That you were declaring that you were a registered sex offender.
Yeah.
Like, what's that guy doing?
Yeah, I think that's maybe what they thought, but it was kind of like
John Turturro, like
that's how I was raised. Like when we moved to Virginia, when I was 15, that's what we did. My mom was like, "Hey, everybody, want to go take a walk and like meet the neighbors?"
When I moved to Dallas, everybody brought me cookies and stuff.
There's a comedian that does a bit about that. I can't remember his name. He's an Italian guy. He's funny, but he compares what it used to be like, how people used to just stop by your house and everybody be welcome in, come have some pie and dessert. But now, if somebody knocks on the door or rings the doorbell, everybody's down on the ground. People are like they're running operations on the inside. Who's at our house?
I am so guilty of this.
I am as well.
I'm one of those, like, did someone just ring my doorbell? That's an offensive thing to me. I shouldn't even have a doorbell.
I'm not expecting someone. What's going on?
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of like I mean, it's gotten so much worse because now it's like when my phone rings and I look at it, I'm like, who's calling?
Yes.
Like,
it gets like spam. Your phone gets spammed all the time now.
I try and comfort myself by saying, if you don't already have their number saved, that you don't need to talk to them. But it definitely isn't true. And
I'm always British when I answer, as though a random person would know whether or not I'm British.
That's a good idea. I should start playing around with that. Actually,
I let my son who has Down syndrome answer.
That's a good idea too. Anything. Yeah. I'm developing such a dislike for like talking to people who like without me being prepared for it have to talk to me, to the point where like I told my UPS driver just the other day, hey man, just leave the packages on the door. You don't have to ring the bell anymore.
Well, that's what
I was like, I'm usually recording, so that sometimes can be disturbing. I'm not recording.
I totally understand that kind of feeling too, and that's something that my wife and I are very consciously, and that's what we're doing now with Chillderburg Town. Is this is what we want to do? We're going to do it, and we're the type of people that once we decide we're going to do something, we do it. And so I think that's the direction that we're going to take. Is to live free in an unfree world is move to a place and make a place with people who want to be free, and you don't mess with people who are armed up. So I think.
Yeah, and I think that kind of alludes to I agree with you 100%, Jacob, about the aesthetic of agorism or agorism. I think a lot of it is really goofy. And I think that there's a big distinction in that community of living free for the sake of undermining the state and living free for the sake of empowering the self.
Right.
And a lot of people fall into this trap of, hey, I've just got to do this, this, and this, and this, and go out of my way to do this just because I might take some little bit out of the state's income or something like that, rather than just empowering yourself. And that can be anything. That can be learning new skills. That can be becoming more wealthy. That can be holding your money outside of a bank. That can be, any number of things. But like the aesthetic of like obsessing over black market, it's weird because if you're an agorist for the sake of undermining the state, then you're still defining yourself from the state. Yeah. You're living at the sake of the state. You're just doing the opposite of what they want rather than just doing what you want.
Yeah, and we talked about this on the last long intentional community episode, or maybe it was the one before that. Was that the other problem with. Actually, I wouldn't say this is a problem with agorism, because it's a problem with the agorist in personality kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Like a libertarian's personality. It's that.
Oh, I love that.
Why would you, instead of just saying we're holding a flea market or it's a farmer's market or something like that, why would you say we're holding a black market on June 20th or whatever? Like, well, that's asking for trouble.
There again, this is a bugaboo of mine. Is participate in markets.
Yeah.
The only thing that makes it a black market is some other bureaucrat's opinion. I don't care about bureaucrats' opinions. So I participate in markets. The thing that dictates whether it's a black or a white market is if some jerk off wrote it down on a piece of paper, and I don't care about that jerk off. So I don't care if it's a black or a white market. I participate in markets, and whatever it is whatever some other bureaucrat decides. Doesn't matter. Doesn't affect me in Carcadia because I'm a separate country.
Yeah. Well, that's fair.
This time period that I've, just this year when I've kind of made that transition, it was really an epiphany, another epiphany. My first epiphany was that a limiting government as a utopian fantasy. That was like, I was like, oh, so like government's not possible. And then I read Hoppe. I was very excited to find that you don't need it anyway. Yeah. But my new epiphany was that I was fully responsible for the fact that I was totally dependent on the infrastructure of a state that I thought I was actively working against by asking them to restore the framework. Now, I did that because I was on the radio. So like when I had that epiphany and I was just like, oh, this could never work. The American experiment cannot work. And then Hoppe, whatever. Then someone asked me to do the radio show. I had no intention of it. I was getting my CFA. I wanted to be like a hedge fund manager. And I ended up doing the radio show. And it was impossible to connect to people by saying, this is totally hopeless, whatever. And then I had little kids and I was like, you know what? Defending the Bill of Rights is not a bad thing to do. So I'm going to do it. And I did. And that does kind of circle around to the one remaining pillar that I have of all of this. But I realized that I was making demands of a system that I had recognized was so inherently contradictory that it was not possible. So like that was me being just assuming that the house of cards would stay together. And I was wrong. And I have absolutely no right, not because I didn't build that road or I didn't pay my taxes or whatever, but because I'm living in a fantasy world to think that the taxes and the roads and the regulated industry and all that kind of stuff is a system that is going to ever preserve any of my rights, but as a matter of principle. So I did come around this year and say, okay, I wanted to move to Austin. And then finally, like my husband and I were like, well, we just can't move to Austin. You've got to move to outside Austin or wherever. And I lived in Texas for a long time. He's from Texas. I got married at St. Mary's in Austin. And, so he asked if we can stay at the Four Seasons when we go to Chillderburg, because that's where we got married. So I don't know if that violates.
It's like, I think it's like 45 minutes to Austin proper from Muleshoe Bend. So it's not that far.
I don't know if that's going to work unless they have Ubers going out there. But the bottom line was wherever I was going to end up being, I decided you need to have like a rain barrel or water or whatever. But what you really need is to make sure you can defend the rights, your rights to self-defense. Like you have to be able to defend the four corners of your property. Like the thing in Portland, people were saying, oh, we should go help those people. Like we shouldn't help those people. They gave up their rights. They don't have their right to defend their own property because they gave it up. Like screw them. Yeah. And so then they're all moving to places where you didn't give up your rights. But the point is that I would then feel like it was incumbent on me to, if you have to recognize the reality of the government around you, that they can at any time come storm your house, Waco style, and take your guns, like you probably have to be a member of the community in a way that you can, talk to your neighbors. They know you're not a nut job. You just want to defend your property. But I feel like I tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like I feel like that is a constraint on your own ability to be totally independent, but it may be the only constraint.
Well, and I think that's that's also kind of something we've been talking about a little bit in the intentional community stuff, is that there is and I'm this way too, there's this very independent spirit, and to a large degree, I mean, that's what we're about, but you're not, you are part of a greater system, whether you like it or not, and you do have control over your community. So over what community you're part of, I guess would be a better way of saying it.
That's a starting.
Yeah, that's the starting point. And there's, in this kind of investigation of how these intentional communities work, like I've come across a bunch of different ones, and some of them are like right in the middle of the suburbs or in fairly populous areas where people have split off and have designed their community in such a way where it is very integrated and connected and everybody knows what's going on. So like if somebody came into my neighborhood and, arrested Charles down the street or whatever, I wouldn't know. Like I'd have no idea. But if you're in a community that is integrated enough where you're seeing each other on a daily basis or a weekly basis, at least just out, you're seeing each other at some point, then people kind of notice. Like, I mean, Bird, you probably have heard these types of stories. Like,
well, I was just thinking of like Curious Joel is a big one. You might know that if you're from Rockland County. I don't think it's too far. Curious Joel is a total intentional community. It's all Orthodox Jews. They all decided one day we were just good. And I mean, you can't blame them.
Taxes, though, you know.
Oh, really? Are
they the ones that were getting all the shit from?
Yeah, but that wasn't why. I was about to say, because the way Bill de Blasio has been talking about Orthodox Jews, I can imagine that there's a Jewish flight in New York going on right now with the way that he's been speaking about it. It's insane. But yeah, those intentional communities exist even in New York. I mean, all you got to do is have a strong community and they'll move together somewhere.
And a lot of places like that, too, the police just don't police it.
Dude,
so,
why would they need to? Yeah,
I live in one of those communities. I mean,
there you go. Yeah,
and you need to come over, Jacob. But I live in one of those communities where people will ring my doorbell 2 times a day sometimes just to come by, say hi. And now it's not
bring you eggs and stuff.
Yeah,
like chickens
I have like roosters running around in the
that duck. How's that duck doing?
It's a duck. I haven't seen the duck in a while, but I mean,
and Hartford, Fort Worth proper too.
I'm in Fort Worth. I can bike downtown, but I live in the historic poor black community. But what happened was everybody walled them off for a long time. And then they became a really, really strong community. And I'm like probably one of the only white people in here.
See, that's what I think the anti-racist thing is about, breaking up those communities.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
I talked with my next door neighbor. He's like 70, grew up here before, the drug war and all and everything. And that was like, you really get that vibe where they weren't really all that big on integration. They were like,
they had FUBU was like a forced thing. They were just like, hey, we used to have our own. We didn't have McDonald's. We had McDougal's. My neighborhood, if I've thumbed through, like I've gone through all the old papers online, they've logged them all in like the library. This neighborhood, it's all burned out now. There's no businesses. They colluded, all of the big box stores colluded with the health departments and shut everything down and lined the outside of the community with big box stores. But they had everything. They had doctors, they had engineers, they had architects. I think
that's what they did to build a Barclay Center in Brooklyn. They did the exact same thing.
But the community remains. And I mean, you'll see people riding horses. People will be out with guns, like just carrying them over to their neighbor's house to go clean them. Like it's a madhouse in here, and the police come. A madhouse in the best way. The police come in. The police come in like every now and then to harass people about drugs, but other than that, they don't even police here. It's basically all volunteer.
So these autonomous zones, Monica, that have been popping up. All the lefties are like, oh, let's try one here. Let's try one. So there was Nayaz. I popped into that one day. I liked it. It was fun. But to speak further to this idea of maybe we'll call them unintentional communities are pretty good too. There's like autonomous Marxism would be like the thought process behind this, but there's lots of little groups. And I was telling Pete about this a couple months ago, and I recently popped into Williamsburg, one of my favorite places to go to in the city, because precisely what I'm about to say. There is still what I would describe as a common going on right now in Williamsburg at this very moment, in that when I went both times that I've been to Williamsburg, there are no police cars as I've seen, which is unusual for Williamsburg because it's a big money place. There's people still, furniture's out on the street. People are drinking drinking beers and smoking blunts on the street, sitting in sofas that have been brought out from the inside.
What this do you mean by big money place?
Big parents' money. A lot of kids come in. Williamsburg is where a lot of rich
outside
kids.
They're
living like
bohemians.
Yes, they're living like bohemian. Yes, they are. But it creates this opportunity for me to go there and do that too. And so there was a Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, fighting video game tournament that was held on the street. On the street. And it definitely was not an official tournament, but there was probably a 30-inch television, and somebody had their
tournament.
Yeah, somebody had their Switch out, and they had it plugged into the TV, which was plugged into something that was connected to somebody's house. And I popped in and I was like, are you guys like open to other people playing? Because I'm good at the game. Are you open to other people? They were like, yeah, come on, let's play. So that literally would never have happened in any normal
new chess table. We
were in a lot that would normally have been blocked off, and so somebody must have cut it because it's right by the train station. So I've seen this a million times. And that's how I knew to go to this place. So there's on top of unintentional communities, intentional communities, there's also just communes. Like there's also just these weird little things in one of the biggest cities in the world, one of the most regulated cities in the world. There's that popping up too. Yeah, when you end up going home, obviously when you go home, you're back into the same old situation. But I mean, I know a lot of people who haven't been out of their house in several weeks. I'm sure they could use a common area like that to have a good time.
I'd say a failed digital version of that is the Nextdoor app. I've seen so much activity on that in the past year, and it gets real spammy.
Yes, that's right.
I think it is kind of what you're saying is that people who haven't been outside in a long time, they just decide to not. And, up Colorado County, where I'm from in California, it's shut down again. But after a couple of months, like basically the entire town just went, okay, we're just not doing this anymore. And it's not a huge town. I think Placerville's maybe 15,000 people or something. It's not big, but it used to be called Hangtown. It's like a tourist attraction for gold rush stuff. It's a big Harley town, like working class mostly. I mean, they got a lot of people from the Bay Area moving up there now, but like the entire town was just like, yeah, we're just not doing this anymore. And the sheriff came out and he said, I'm not enforcing it. And so all the restaurants opened up. People went back to work, started doing stuff again. And same thing up in Shasta County. A lot of the communities up there in Shasta and a lot of Northern California, which is very libertarian area. Or I wouldn't even say they're libertarian. They're mountain folk. They're like Appalachian people. It's out
in Lake Oconee in Georgia over the summer. There's people up there who had no idea what COVID was. They had never heard of it.
Yeah. Well, and you see that too, like in places where people do have to rely on themselves and their immediate community more. You see that where they kind of just make a decision and they just are like, yeah, we're just not doing this. And even in places that are closer to the Bay Area, you've got like Village Homes in Davis. It's fairly close to the Bay Area. A lot of people that live there work in Silicon Valley or in the San Francisco area. And this was an intentional neighborhood set up in the 70s to be a permaculture neighborhood. And it's a lot of rich people who live there, but a lot of them just kind of decided not to do it.
Does it have a lot of like fruit and nut bearing trees?
They grow enough food without any sort of maintenance. They grow enough food in this neighborhood in Davis that they can supply 80% of their nutritional needs.
Wow.
And it's a suburban neighborhood. Yeah, it's a suburban neighborhood too. It's wild. They use a couple of techniques that make it a little bit different than most suburban neighborhoods. So it's called clustering. So they build the houses very, very close to each other in clusters throughout the suburbs. And then the rest of it is open space for fruit trees and perennials and things like that. You and your cluster get a certain amount of property where you have first rights to the fruit. And they grow so much that nobody ever fights over it. And
feudalism. That's awesome.
Kind of, yeah. And then
in Italy, I remember my sister speaks Italian.
It sounds like a kibbutz. Also, put your work in, you get your first pick, and then everybody else gets your picks.
But what's great about it though is that there's almost no work to do because they were able to raise the water table in Davis, which is the Central Valley. Huh. They were able to raise the water table under their property by 6 feet.
How?
And this is California where like the water table is just dropping all the time, but it's just because they do good water management. They do the swales so when the water, and actually they redirect a lot of the street water into filtration systems and then put that back in the ground, but they've never had to irrigate ever. They grow tons of food and they don't even really have to do much maintenance on it. It's really cool.
See, I worry about places like that. I've noticed there was one place in Washington state, unrelated to that kind of thing, but it would be even worse for them, where the sheriff said, I'm not enforcing the masks. And they immediately gave that town national attention, and the Proud Boys held a maskless, in-your-face, overcrowded rally there. And I feel like these places can unless they're numerous enough, unless people aren't going to piggyback off of other people's efforts, something existing, it has to be something that it'll just get overrun and destroyed. And if not just by people wanting to gravitate, there are a lot of forces out there that want to undermine these kind of things. So I feel like there has to be a formula. And is that what you were saying? Like you have to be able to just start over.
Right. And that's the goal. That's the goal of the Chillderburg town right now is the end goal is to make someplace. Actually, it's what the guy from the Strong Towns podcast talks about is a good life in a prosperous place. That's the main goal. The secondary goal is to basically just put it formula. I'm a software developer. Everything to me is procedural. So is the procedural process to make one of these things work. And here it is on a, to use the old media style or whatever, here it is on a CD.
Yeah.
Pop it in the computer. It'll tell you what to do, at least in this place. There's going to be different laws for different places, but wherever we end up choosing, it'll be documented that this is how we do it. There's a really good town I'm reading about in this book. It's pretty cool. It's called Experimental Americans. And it's about they bill it as utopian movements, but one of the movements they talk about this is a town in North Carolina called Silo, and it was an intentional community set up in 1937, and it is a corporation. So the Silo Corporation, you basically when you buy into that, you are now part of the corporation, and instead of owning the land, you own a lifetime transferable lease on the property.
Nice. Yep.
And so that's kind of how they organize it. So that's one way that we're looking at that might work for us as well. Now, Silo is based off of course, because I can't not bring it up in every single episode of anything I'm on. It's a Quaker model. So everything is done the Quaker way.
So they pay their own like they have their own taxes?
No. So Quakers, everything is voluntary. So if they do, the corporation pays the taxes, but it's taken out of the money that the corporation makes on the campground that is on the property. So the people who have the property, they can contribute or whatever, but it's the corporation pays the taxes and you buy the lease from the corporation. And then that's built in. You can see other tax records online. They're a nonprofit, but they've been basically revenue neutral for their entire existence.
Yeah, I've heard of a couple. Maybe it's that one. Maybe it's another one I have heard. But do you remember when I talked to that guy, Bellamy Fitzpatrick? He's in upstate New York. He has a couple of acres. He's there with his woman. And over the summer when I was visiting my mother in Rockland, I drove up there. It's pretty far. It's up by like Vermont and Massachusetts, New York, where they meet. But it was just the two of them. And they were growing all sorts of stuff. They were creating like a permaculture world for themselves, which they're like, it's going to take years. We can eat this stuff now. We can eat the asparagus. And like, I didn't know asparagus was a permaculture thing. Yeah. But they had terracing, they had wind barriers, they anticipated that kind of stuff. And that was just two people on a couple of acres. So I feel like, and then his idea was, he said that there's been plenty of insight into the ideal community size. And he said, really, you don't want to get more than 100, 150 people. But that's what
Silos is. Yeah, Silo is 100 families. That's their model.
So hunters and gatherers traveled in packs between 50 and 100.
Yeah.
That's another recommendation is that book Against the Grain, where he talked about, although I did try to get him on my show and he said no.
Well, I mean, the problem is that when you get too big, I think, and this is one thing that, again, we've been talking about on the California Next Style podcast a little bit, is when you get to the point where it's very easy to be anonymous in the community, that's when you start getting problems, I think, because it pulls a little bit of responsibility off of you.
That's what they said about that number. That's why it was the magic number, because that's how many people you can keep track of. And it happens to be how many Christmas cards I send out. Yeah. And that's what he said is that, and his example was, if Bill Gates lived in a community like that, he would just be a jerk and everyone would know it. Yeah. But he doesn't. He lives in a very different kind of
trying to vaccinate everybody.
He's the boss,
Yeah.
So So that's my answer to how to live free in an unfree world.
Yeah,
a lot of stuff awesome. that I hear about agorism. It's like hunters and gatherers. When you go back, they learned. The kids learned by playing and learned by modeling themselves after what the adults did. And in effect, they learned the practical skills they needed to survive, the hunting and gathering skills that they needed. And so anywhere they go, they could figure out the lay of the land and they could survive. And the more we moved to civilization and technology, the further away we got from that. Now people
are you familiar with the Foxfire series of books? I feel like it was
I'm not sure.
Appalachians, or I thought it was in the Carolinas. It's like 14 books, and it was probably 100 years ago. There were still so many people living in the mountains that the person who did this project went and just found out everything from skinning squirrels to making baskets. Yeah. And I have it. Nice. Binkley sent me a book about that kind of stuff too. And I mean, what do? I collect books. I don't grow chickens, but you know, but it would be like the rolling papers. I'll just bring the books and you can let me
that's the other thing. The other aesthetic thing about the agorism is like, for me, I kind of like my quality of life, and I don't want to go. Like, I could go live completely free in the woods and and decrease my quality of life. But there's a reason, like from a market standpoint, that we have a global division of labor and specialization, and you know the ideas of relative and an absolute advantage, and all of this stuff that empowers this super high quality of life. All we have to do is just make sure that we align incentives for people to act more correctly.
But I think that we're at an intersection right now with 3D printing and digital currency as well. Is that these things are kind of lining up where what humans are evolved for, or whatever everybody believes, what the optimal community size, the technology has gotten there for people to be able to return to that and still maintain a high standard of living, which I think they could have done for a long time. But I think that it is just so in our faces right now with in particular cryptocurrency and 3D printing. It's just how good. When I first got in 2010ish, when I first got involved in 3D printing, it was so difficult to do anything. And now, like, you can get it from Amazon and it was expensive too. Like, my first 3D printer was like $1,600, and I had to build it myself. And every single time you wanted to print something, you had to recalibrate it. It was a pain in the butt. Now it's like you get them self-calibrating from Amazon. You can't really print like the most amazing things ever, but when you look at like the 3D printed guns and things like that people are doing online now, like it's incredible. It's just I'm just astonished by how quickly the technology's progressed.
What do you print?
I don't print anything anymore, but when I used to do embedded systems development, and my boss, the first like public open source model for a 3D printer was called a Mandela. And so we built one of those, and when we were done, we were like, what do we make? and we didn't know. Like, we were like, oh, we've done it, but like, now what? And at the time there was no Thingiverse, there was none of these like shared files. We had to kind of make our own stuff. And we never really made anything big. And then a couple of years later, I built another one. Yeah, I built another one a couple of years later, and I made like clips for closing bags of chips and things like that. Like, knickknacks and things like that. Can
I add on to you here? Yeah. Because there's one thing you missed, which I will always harp on, is the internet. In and of it, I mean, if you slap on a VPN and you use a proxy browser, you can be undetected on the internet and do anything you want. Yeah. Now, if you couple that with a service like the Pirate Bay, or let's say, well, any of the smaller torrenting sites, not only can you get anything you want, but now they've opened it up so that you can download 3D printing models. Yeah. So now you can now there is an open library of free plates. You want to go get a plate? Don't pay Walmart. Just make a plate.
Right.
And don't people print biological tissue and don't they use that in gene editing in some cases?
Now they are. They're like the biohackers are starting to develop a lot of that stuff where
this is the free. Yeah, biohacking would be the other thing we must talk about, right? Yeah. That is another huge tool that we could eventually use.
But before we get into that, I mean, all of this is to say, like, I think a lot of the agorist stuff, especially aesthetic, is like, get away from people. And it's like, I want to get with people because people are powerful. Like, people are smart and capable. Yeah. As long as the incentives are aligned, I want to be around people. I want to bring what I have to the table and use what they have, they're bringing to the table to create something that's even better and improves my quality of life and their quality of life. I like being around people most of the time. I mean, there's some bad experiences, but like,
that reminds me a lot of, did you guys remember a couple of years ago, Jeffrey Tucker gave that talk that was Capitalism is Love, I think is that
sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was actually, I thought, very good. And he was basically countering the narrative that capitalism is all about greed and stuff like that. And he's like, well, no, but I mean, if you think about it, this is the same thing. This is what people think of as capitalism is, from the public schooling and stuff like that. But And I know, Bird, you're not particularly keen on the capitalist thing, but like
I don't like the label. I feel like
we'll just say markets. People. We'll just say markets, but people participating in markets inherently. Yeah, exactly. It's community. It's cooperative. You have, and it's a evolutionary advantage too. It's you're going to be able to live longer and have the potential to have more kids if you're cooperative a market space. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're in these like,
if you demonstrate love, that's insurance.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's why you do it. But let me ask, I feel like there's a lot of empowerment and value in feeling like you could like go live in the woods if you had to. Sure. And that otherwise there's that's why they have this level of terror working. And I feel like it really wouldn't be that much of an investment for somebody to figure out just some of the basics just as a backup plan, another insurance policy.
Well, and bushcraft is fun too. So like, I mean,
there's a significant amount of terror of seeing like a moose or a bear alone in the woods. So like, I mean, you're to some degree, it might be a trade-off of terror. Like, it's not like you just go off.
But I mean, if you're empowered, if you know how to do stuff, it's much harder to fuck with a guy who was in combat and has his gun. It's like he's going to use a 3D printer because he wants a job and he's got a house, but he's the guy, I'm not that guy and I feel it. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Uber.
To be empowered, you mean acquire knowledge, right?
I mean, knowledge and skills. Yes, ability.
Self-empowerment.
The empowerment
slap on.
You have alternatives.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. So what we do is we slap on a VPN and we Google Library Genesis, and you can download any published book, probably that you can think of, including field manual. I have 6 terabytes of saved documents that aren't books. They're just documents of how to survive, how to do this.
Is there any
risk all of
them to that too?
To that library?
Not if you have a VPN.
If you have a
EMP that into disexistence.
Nope, they can't do a damn thing. Really. Not a damn thing.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, it's so you are today. We live in the freest world ever is the funniest thing. And it's hard to see that because the technology that is the freest thing is still foreign to people. But within 5 or 10 years, especially how long this thing goes on for. I mean, I talk about the internet all the time and everything you can do on it all the time. That to me, I mean, that's our opportunity right there. There's never been a time in history where you could simply go away and move into the woods with more convenience than you probably could today.
Yeah, no joke.
Especially with like the advent of like mesh networking that's coming up too.
Can't wait. I was going to say, and Monica, I'm with you. The only thing that I would live in the woods in a cabin that nobody could get to, assuming you could lay fiber wire down for less than $1,200 a square foot.
I firmly believe that we are on the precipice of aligning human incentives where the looking forward to a place where we are collaborative, but do have some sort of, a little bit of independence as well, is so much better than looking back. Like between digital currencies with Bitcoin, mesh networks.
You have such opportunity. Tor is brilliant.
Tor is crazy. I mean, the idea of Tor is insane. Yes. And all of this, and it's also 3D printing. It's expanding. The more people, that's the thing, is like it's network effect. So the more people that get in, the faster the technology progresses, and then the more people that get in, it's a positive feedback loop. I mean, I have never been. I talk about this with Rollo a lot and Bird, but and Jacob. I've never been. I feel so privileged to be a libertarian in this time than 30 years ago.
Yes.
I mean, it's crazy. We have so much to look forward to. It's absolutely
Well, I mean, it's just, and even
this is not normal for us either. I don't know how this happened.
I mean, even
cynical. Upbeat here that
it's weird.
Shocking me. But I have one final. You can say what you're going to say, and then I have one.
I was going to say, like, even the liberty stuff aside, like, we live in such a capital-rich world right now. And that in itself is just is a privilege too. That it's very easy to focus on the negatives, and I do it a lot. Like I being in the liberty community, I think you get together and you complain about the feds like half the time, and like that, and that's your life or whatever. But like think about too is that being able to get together, have a cheap pizza, drink a bunch of cheap beers, and be under like a roof with electricity and stuff like that. Like this is a ridiculously capital intense world. And we're super, super lucky to have been born into, even with all of the lockdowns and stuff like that, we're super lucky to have been born into this world. Like you think back, like even
my son who has Down syndrome, and he could actually produce as much as he consumes.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys have to go. I have to say one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
I am going to count on the specialization of labor because I have spent my entire life perfecting things like grilled cheeses.
Oh, yeah.
And whiskey sours. I'm not learning more, and I can't skin a squirrel.
Yes.
But if you guys can maintain a certain level of civilization, just stick me in the bar. And we'll all be. It's this gen of the rolling paper. Just
Carr has first dibs on the bar in Chillderburg town, but maybe he'll give you first dibs.
Every New Yorker,
box, and he put stuff in it.
I would advise heavily against any further. As long as you want me to allow you into the bar.
I was going to say there might not be a place for me in your world after all.
I
be my understudy.
Every New Yorker who comes into this community of mostly people who are not from New York, who actually have like survival skills. I've done the exact same thing, except not with bartending, but my skill, which would be talking and reading news and books and stuff. I remember distinctly that I said to Jacob, when you get this established, I have no skills, but I can run the radio station.
Yeah,
you can be the good morning libertarian.
Yes, someone or even better. Who else wouldn't want to do this with me? The late night show. Hey, if you're up at 3 a.m.
We'll have to have a zoo, though. We're all vying for that job, too.
Yeah, you're right. God.
Bird will
all right,
be
guys, I'm going to wish you a happy holiday and a very free in your heart, soul, and your world holiday season. I love it. I cannot believe that you guys got me out of my cynical downward spiral.
Oh, yeah.
And I have more hope than I have had since this thing began. Wow.
It's nice to talk to libertarians that aren't in despair.
Oh, no.
We goof off too much.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to end right now before we go. Someone else is just like, oh, did you hear about this? So thanks a lot, guys. Until next time.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us, Monica.
Thank you.
Leo.